Good evening, everybody. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for being here and giving the channel a try. Based on the multitude of topics that we cover, it is all for one purpose, and that is to inform you of different varieties of topics and situations that many people want to learn about, but just really never have taken the time to do so. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about addiction and recovery. And I know I've talked to you about these topics before, and sometimes these topics are not the kindest topics to talk about, or even topics that people want to hear about. But you know what? It is, since this level of humanity has been a part of my life for a long time, I'm pretty well versed in it. So I thought I'd talk about the setup for relapse and use a good example that I've used for multitudes of years describing the setup for relapse. Well, if you don't know what addiction is, if you don't know what recovery is, then I'm about to inform you tonight that it is different things, and it means different things to different people. Not necessarily does everybody who gets into recovery do they use a 12-step program. Many times they can use any power greater than themselves that they ultimately understand that they've been their own God, so to speak, for multitudes of years, and their self destructive patterns of living have led them down this path. You know, there's a lot of burnt down houses. There's a lot of situational events that we go through in our addiction where we hurt other people, and multitude of time we think that we could never repair those things because we've done too much to go on and not enough to be able to go back. Um, let's talk about the word addiction. It's very simplistic terms. If you've ever tried to stop something or told yourself, you know what, this is being maladaptive in my life, I need to stop doing this, and weren't able to do so, then you possibly could have had an addiction. And there's a difference between abuse and dependency. You know, many times people take that dependency word to mean that they're dependent on it, like they need it to function. But think about when you're using the word dependency and you're saying, well, I need it to function. I don't need it to function. I can do without it. But honestly, can you? Will you? Have you? What happened when you stop taking it? What happens when you are forced to stop taking it? Do you handle that situation well? Or are you pacing the floors? Are you edgy, anxious, depressed? You can't sleep. You have these situations in life that not being on the chemical makes it worse than actually being on the chemical. Then we get into that is the abuse portion, which ultimately lead to a tolerance, which ultimately lead to dependency. Let's say that you get your first DWI, you tell yourself, you know what, I don't have a problem with alcohol, I really don't. But yet, in a couple weeks later, guess what? Another DWI. Then you lose your job. But instead of using those situations as sounding board to do something different, you just continue to compound the pattern. You continue to compound the situation to make it worse, which leads into the full blown addiction that leads into the dependency And you know, whenever you get to that portion, a lot of times it does take rehab, it does take jail, it does take these kind of things to ultimately get you back on course. So let's listen to Michael and let's listen to his breakdown on the setup for relapse because there are multitudes of situations for different type of people, and they choose to go about this differently because they think, in so many words, I can have it all. I can do this on my own. There's no way that I need any help from anybody or anything. And you know, when you're in that position in life and you're trying to get better, it's very difficult to do this on your own. Hey, Carl, long time no see, buddy. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Hey, you know, let's listen to Michael and let's listen to what he has to say, okay? Here we go.
My name is Mike Johnson. I'm a drug counselor. I'm going to give you a presentation that will deal with your relapse dynamic and your setup for relapse. Okay? That's what I'm going to work on today. Here's the thing, though. A lot of us don't understand that when we deal with the lifestyle that we in and the lifestyle that we enjoy, there are some certain options for us. All right? Some of those options.
And let's stop right there because he's talking about a lifestyle. And if you've ever been deeply invested in this type of lifestyle, you're going to understand what he's about to say as far as the lifestyle. You can quit drugs and alcohol, but many people become fascinated, habitually connected to the lifestyle. And the lifestyle is what ultimately kills people in the end. The drug, the alcohol are merely symptoms of something worse happening.
Uh, Death, jail, addiction, insanity, and broke. All right? The thing is that too often we fall into one of those categories or getting close to a few of them. Am I right or wrong? Okay, when you look at your behavior, when you look at your lifestyle, all right, I'm headed for one of these 5 categories based on the kind of activities I'm involved in and the appetite that I have. Am I right or wrong? Okay, that's the main thing I need to look at. I also need to know that as it relates to goals.
That is a very powerful statement, Carl. He said most people don't understand the danger of withdrawal from alcohol. It's very dangerous, and you believe that's why it's legal. They do not understand the withdrawal process. You're right. And yes, PKC, late night, late night. Um, so he's talking about 3 corners of life in which we live in as all individuals because we have basic components of living. There are social, sexual, and security. So this is basically another variation of that. In one corner, the addictive process leads to death, jail, addiction, insanity, or broke. And if you've ever been a drug addict, an alcoholic, a compulsive gambler, if you've ever had issues with food, if you've ever had issues with pornography or sexual addiction or anything like that, then you understand exactly what he's talking about. Because you know what? It merely starts out as something to help you either wind down, become emotionally more socially acceptable, you know, be more sociable. You're going to happy hour. They don't do happy hour much anymore, but those of us that are old enough to remember the good old days of happy hour, you couldn't wait to get to happy hour because your day was so chaotic or stressful or whatever. You were sociable with a group of friends. You met up at a particular place and you had drinks. There was nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what happens is those individuals did not realize they were one traumatic event in their lives from becoming full blown because they were already abusing the alcohol. And like Carl said, there are different levels of withdrawals. And people don't seem to understand that as well. They think that they can quit cold turkey and there's not going to be ramifications from that. So that's a very good catch. So let's go on and listen to what Michael has to say about this.
Priorities, responsibility, and our being focused and maintaining a certain amount of discipline, that is an area we having problems in. One thing that I find is always relative to the relapse dynamic of individuals involved in the criminal justice system who also use mood-altering chemicals, they are not real clear on what their goals or priorities are. Oftentimes, when they talk about their goals and priorities, what they're doing is giving the counselor a lot of lip service and trying to tell the counselor what the counselor want to hear. We say things like, I'm going to church, I'll get a job, I'm going to spend time with my family, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to use 12-step groups. That's what we tell a counselor. That may also be some of the things that we truly desire to do. Am I right or wrong?
Because he's talking to a group of individuals that are in a rehab program at this point. So he's talking to individuals that are reintegrating back into society. And he's talking their language because a lot of people, if you've ever been in this lifestyle, you totally understand it. Like I was talking about the DWIs, you might get one. You might get sent to some classes, or you might get, sent to do certain things to be able to maintain a level of a lifestyle, to work, to be financially stable, these type of things. But then you get the second one, and it becomes harder and harder to function in society because you can't drive. You might have to have a breathalyzer if they do in your state allow you to have that type of restriction. They might put a breathalyzer in your vehicle, so you have to pay for the breathalyzer. You got to be getting it calibrated every month. You got all these responsibilities, so it starts to compound in the mindset of somebody who's not used to structure or having any kind of level of responsibility towards other people, places, and things. These types of individuals become very stressed out, very overwhelmed because they're not used to being accountable to somebody. And that's what he's saying right now. Is most of the time, these individuals, and I say these individuals because I am one. Even though I'm in recovery, I was one time a person that had no kind of goals, no kind of responsibility, no kind of accountability for anything. I thought that that type of living was boring, and I thought that I'd be damned if I'd ever want to be accountable to anybody or anybody telling me what to do. If you've ever known somebody that way, that's exactly the type of person he's talking about. So here we go.
But there's another part of us that always has a certain hidden motive. Like many of you sitting here right now, you may want to give up alcohol and you may want to give up drugs. But there's something else that you don't want to give up. What might that be? That's closely associated to the alcohol and the drugs.
Lifestyle.
What you mean by lifestyle?
Well, I mean, if you're involved in drugs and involved in press people, looks, cards, things like that.
Okay. Now watch this one. When he talks about lifestyle, here's something else. There's another corner. This corner here, sex, money, material things, family, and loved ones. Those are my three corners. Those are the three corners that we tend to operate out of the most. Keep in mind, this bottom box is blurred. It's not really defined like it should be. To whereas the individual is not truly understanding what their purpose or goals are as it relates to their priority.
Me being a therapist for a lot of years, I have sat across from people like he's about to mention. You try to keep them in that middle box. You try to get them to see that there's goals in their life that they can accomplish. Being successful, doing something they've never done, prioritizing the important things in life, having responsibility to yourself, being focused, having the discipline and the structure to do these things on a daily basis. But you know, a lot of people, when you start suggesting that they change their lives for the better as you see it, they might not even see they have a problem. So you're going against the belief system that is already rubbing with you. Okay. So if you don't believe that you have a problem and there's somebody telling you, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try to be more responsible? Why don't you try to have goals? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? If I don't see that I have a problem, then you're irritating. You're making me more agitated because I look at that as control, not as help. So, in essence, you cannot go into certain things to assist people if they're not ready to change. You can't. There's no way that you're going to be able to change somebody if they're not ready to make that ultimate change. And it has to be a contemplative thought process that comes from them, not from you. So I could tell you all day, hey, you're going to get cirrhosis. Hey, there's going to be bronchitis and lung problems and all this from smoking chemicals and all this stuff and doing this and that and the other. But if you are not currently being affected, then it's not going to register because you're going to look at it as this person trying to tell me what to do. And as I told you a couple minutes ago, I was one of those people that didn't like being told what to do. I still don't enjoy it, but I'm a lot more accommodating towards certain things than ever in my lifetime. So is this making sense? Is this making sense to you guys? Because I'm trying to simplify it in a way where you can understand it without trying to force recovery on people, like I just said, in a way that you're trying to control them. I'm not doing that tonight. I'm not trying to change your mind about drugs. I'm not trying to change your mind about alcohol. I'm just trying to inform people of certain dynamics that are out there that continue to keep people in the grip, so to speak. But as Carl just reiterated, nobody can force anyone to change. It's impossible. That's a very powerful statement right there. Now let's keep going on and let's hear what he has to say about these three corners because they interact so well together, and you're really gonna see it.
Priorities and their needs in life. Okay? When we move from this box to this upper right-hand corner is when we start making a lot of deals. You can sit here with me all day long, and I'm going to try my best to keep you in this middle box. But many of you will be preoccupied and obsessed with something or somebody in this upper right-hand corner. Okay? And as you nod your head, it makes me understand that you know what I'm talking about. Okay? When I move from this spot right here to this upper right-hand corner, I'm now in the process of making a promise and or a deal with somebody to give me these things. That's what.
And how many times have you known somebody who has been very manipulative? Well, you know what? All right, I'll stop smoking. I'll stop drinking. I'll stop hanging out with my buddies. I'll stop going to happy hour. I'll stop doing this if you give me this. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because, you know, hold on a second, guys. So, making those promises and deals, okay? How many times have you heard people in this situation, like he said, like Carl's saying, he's making a bunch of great points. Like they're locked up, okay? The first time the DWI. You're basically telling people, hey, get me out. I won't drink anymore. I've learned my lesson, blah, blah, blah. And then something happens. Something happens. The promise and the deal for you to get them out of jail. Within matters of hours, weeks, guess what? This person is back to drinking. And you know what their rationale is saying? Well, you know what? I need this little drink. I can't quit cold turkey. I can't quit cold turkey. I need to, I need to take the edge off. So that person who they've been manipulating all this time gives in and says, okay, just a little bit. What's the next word? But don't be driving. Okay? Don't be driving. So you're falling into that manipulative tactic that says, all right, I'm okay with you drinking as long as you stay home. But what do? They're already drinking. They're making promises and deals to be able to continue to drink. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, just let me drink a little bit. Okay, so you're not setting your boundaries. You're not setting your boundaries with these individuals. So, DWI number 2. This time your trust has been broken. They're starting to lie to you. They're starting to deceive you. And you start finding out a lot of things. How long have you been drinking behind my back? You're no longer employed. You lost your job because you were showing to work drunk. Where have you been? What have you been doing? All this stuff starts to unravel. And the individual who refuses to acknowledge a problem digs even harder into the ground because they don't want to be exposed. Let's go on with what Michael's saying.
Family and loved ones come in at. There's somebody I'm working with on this upper right-hand corner, family and loved ones, as it relates to sex, money, and material things. Material things also include jewelry, as the individual said, cars, also clothes, which are symbolic of status. A funny thing happens when we ask you to give up alcohol and drugs. We are also asking you to give up something that you really don't want to give up.
Control.
You really don't want to give up your power and or your control. But you need to understand something. If I leave you by yourself with the power, with all the power and all the control that you have, without you being truly focused on what's happening down here in this middle box, you going over there. That's how you got here anyway. You follow? Something that you did going from here to here wound you up over here. And the biggest fight that we have with you right now, we're trying to tell you, look at what's going on over here in this upper right-hand corner. Oftentimes you fight us and say, no, it ain't none of your business. It's part of my lifestyle. You follow?
Because without that power, without that control, most of us who've ever lived in the world of addiction have that understanding that we're controlling other people, places, and things in our mind but we have no control over ourselves. And that's where the chemicals come in. That's where the alcohol comes in. That is that yin to our yang. It is that area that says, okay, with this, everything is balanced. But it's really not. It's really not. And we lose that identity whenever we're forced to quit. And just, Carl, you're making some awesome, excellent statements. You really are. They used to say drink responsibly, right? They really did. Let me send an email right quick while this continues to play. I'm going to have a guest up here in a minute, so let me let Michael talk.
You want to defend that which is designed to kill you. Your real attitude is, why don't all you people leave me alone? Because if y'all leave me alone, I could be busy about the business of killing myself. You understand that? That's your biggest fight. So find respect and dignity from yourself and others. And you don't want it. You don't want it. You're saying, hell no, man. Leave me alone because I've got to find somebody in this world to degrade, to take advantage of, and to play for a fool. Because, see, when I move for this corner, I'm also making a lot of threats. Okay? Because, see, what also goes with the promise and the deal, I may say, well, I'm not gonna get high anymore. Okay? I'm not gonna hang around so-and-so anymore. That's part of the deal to get the car. That may be part of the deal so that I can find housing, so that I can live with a particular person, or so that somebody will give me some money. I'm going to see my PO, or I'm going to therapy, or something of that nature. That's the promise and that's the deal.
Of course it is. And how many of you have known people when they're struggling, getting their life back on track after certain events of interruptions, just for whatever reason, cannot grasp that concept that you must let go of control in order to get control. You know, if you don't work the 12 steps, I get it. There's a lot of people that don't like the 12 steps. I get that. In order to recover, though, you must respect that what is designed to kill you. And a lot of times, if it's not the criminal lifestyle, if it's not the addiction, if it's not the lifestyle in general, it's you. And many people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that you are the problem. I learned very early on I was my own problem. I really did. I learned that at an early part. Now, correcting that I was my problem, now that was the hardest thing to do. Because as we're sitting here tonight, some of you can identify with what I'm talking about. It may even be staring you in the face. You can identify it. You can say, you know what, I might have a little bit of an alcohol problem. I might have a little bit of a drug problem. But you know what? I still go to work. I still get up. I still go to work. I still, take care of my kids, whatever. So therefore, am I really doing that bad? Well, if you're really looking in that mirror, is it really causing you problems to the point where you're losing control? Are you losing control? Are you losing control because you're not able to have that same job? Is your money situation all over the place? Is your mental capacity unable to be stable? Is it all over the place? A lot of people dig really deep into the psychological effects of drugs and alcohol. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for you because if you do have somebody that struggled with this stuff, the last thing you want to do is come at them with, you need to get sober. You need to do this. You need to do that. You know, whenever you're telling somebody what they need to do, it ain't ever going to do any good because you're mandating the driving of a change of thought that this person is not instituting for themselves. I hope that makes sense. Let's finish up the video.
Okay, but in return, I want you to give me housing, money, clothes, jewelry, sex, and things of that nature. That ain't nothing but a game. What I'm secretly trying to do is regain my power and regain my control. You was abstinent for a while, remember? So I stopped getting high in December, but I got high a couple of weeks ago. But what it is that since December, he had had no power, he had had no control. He has not truly felt normal yet because part of our lifestyle, people always talk to me about the lifestyle. You know, I miss the lifestyle. I want to stay involved in the lifestyle. The only thing that was truly in the lifestyle was chaos, confusion, a bunch of fools, and the police.
And counselors.
That's what's in the lifestyle.
Probation.
So when you say, I want to stay in the lifestyle, man, you're telling me that you want to stay right there all your life and try to get right here as fast as you possibly can. Now, the question is, does that make sense? You follow? No, it does not make sense. So if you say it does not make sense, now you are starting to wake up and recognize that one of your goals and one of your priorities is to find all those people that you have in your life right now who have no problem with you living here and leaving there. Because see, the moment that you leave here, you can get a phone call from somebody that will ask you, what you doing? What's happening? What's up? Hitting your pager. You follow? Your pager sometimes is blowing up with phone numbers from people who can't.
And that tells you how old this video is, but it is a message that is eternal. And that is so true. I've taught multitudes of groups where those cell phones are blowing up in the meeting. Those text message notifications are blowing up. Like he's saying, with multitudes of people saying, what are you doing after group? What are you doing after this? Let's go get a drink. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. What are you to do with somebody who is on parole or somebody who's on probation when you're trying to show them that they can come back home? You know what I'm saying? It's I'm gonna put this comment up there because it's awesome. So people who drink have a number. Whatever that number is, you can try to change it, but eventually you get back to that same number of drinks. Yes, that tolerance is real. But like he's saying, you know, you can go back home. There's a time when you can recover. And it doesn't mean that you lose you in the process. You become a greater version. And if people can ever see that, they might want to jump on board to recovery.
Wait to get you back involved in the chaos and the confusion. All right, who'd have no problem with you being involved in the legal system and have no problem with you being a drug addict, have no problem with you being broke, have no problem with you being homeless, and have no problem with you losing your mind. They have no problem with that. But you think they're your...
And he goes on to say, you think they're your best friend, so to speak. You think that they're looking out for your best interests. And you know, multitudes of people say, well, I don't want to blame anybody else for what I do. That's fair enough. That is fair enough. But you know what? At one point in life, responsibility comes back to you. I live by this saying that says, to thy own self be true. I have lived with that for a long time. To thy own self be true. which means that if I'm not true to me, I'll never be true to anybody else or anything in life ever. I'll be lying to you. I'll be manipulating you. I'll be stealing from you. I'll make you believe that I am your best friend while plotting to take something that I want from you. You say 12, that could never be you. Look at who you are, blah blah blah. Well, you know what? We all have that capability of going backwards. We really do. You can say, well, you know what? Do you ever recover? Do you ever have a semblance of a life? Of course. The guest that I'm about to have on, excuse me, he's going to share his story. But can we ever get back home? Can we ever go home again? You know, yeah, I agree with that too. Can we ever go after the jail sentences, after the prisons, after the rehabs, after the counseling sessions, after the groups, the AANA meetings, all these things that are set up? Some people view them as traps or, set up for failures or whatever they want to say. Um, Whatever you believe in, that is your belief, but after you get through all these hoops, can you go back home? And by back home, I mean to a place that most of us want to go back to. We want to go back to our families. We want to go back to our friendship that we've had for years that we ruined, not intentionally, but just being preoccupied with the lifestyle. I'm asking you tonight, do you know anyone that has been down that road? Do you know anyone who feels like they can't come back home because home is not where they're welcome anymore? Do you know anybody who feels like every time I'm around family, I get the guilt trip? Every time I talk to so and so, they're always bringing up what I did rather than giving me credit on who I'm trying to become. Do y'all know people like that? Heck, I'm far removed from my addiction. And I can tell you, there's certain phone calls I can make today. And those first conversations would be, so are you clean? How are you doing with your recovery? Or have you drank? And there's so much stuff that I put in front of my addiction to have people, after all this time, not needing their validation, but to have them kind of not see your growth. It's almost like a kick in the teeth. No, I don't mind you asking. That's what the show's about. My addiction was I was addicted to stimulants, pills, and alcohol, upper and downer, which, I'd get too depressed. I'd need something to bring me up. Hey, that's where the stimulants came in. But what happened, I'd get too high, couldn't function, bring the alcohol in, bring me down a little bit, kind of, self-medicating. I don't know if you remember back in the 90s that we were just talking about. There was a ephedra in capsules, and as you know, as many people know, ephedra is one of the components of methamphetamine. So you could get these pills that were clean and pure, as if you were getting it from the dope man. I'm not saying the same thing as meth or amphetamine, but as far as the stimulant part of it, I know that I didn't sleep for a long time. I know that I was wired. I was wide awake. I know that at one point, I started with one pill. I was almost up to 6, 7 pills a day within less than a 30-day span. I sat in the floor one day. I'm 54. Yes, many things. It wasn't that. It was a little stronger than a many things, but you're right on track with that. I was sitting in the floor one day and I was looking at the carpet, and I shit you not, I was so zoned into the carpet, I could almost see the carpet swaying in front of me. And the hair in the back of my neck, the hair on my head felt like it was growing. I was in a zone. And at that moment, I asked myself, once I snapped out of that, I said, what are you doing? What is this? But by that point, it was exactly a part of life. It was almost like getting up, drinking a cup of coffee, going to work, zooming around all day, coming home, having some hard liquor to calm down, all this, that, and the other. It was a daily experience. It was a daily thing. It was no longer, well, I'm doing this every now and then. It was a daily thing. God forbid I ever was running low, or they banned it, which they ultimately did, you know. That was a sad day in my life where I could not get those pills anymore to help me overcome the depression. But in my life, I was not seeing the correlation between the depression, the anxiety, the anger, because I had a huge anger problem. Huge. Walking around like a ticking time bomb. Never okay in my own skin. Never. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say, hey, I feel like I'm crawling in my skin. I live that life every day. My thoughts were always racing. And I don't want to sit here and tell you I did it on my own, because I did not. I took medications, antidepressants, anti, anti-anxiety, things like that. Because honestly, when I got off that stuff, when I got off the alcohol, when I got off the pills, my brain was mush. And when I tell you that, if you think that I was angry before the chemicals, you had no idea, because I jumped from one to the other. I started with the drug, the alcohol, and I jumped into pornography. I've talked about going to strip clubs in my channel. There's no shame there. I don't have any shame in what I've done in my life. And if you judge me because you view that my life has been full of debauchery, well, that's something that you're judging me on. I lived through it. You didn't. You know what I mean? I went about everything the wrong way. Every choice I would make was a dumb one. Every gamble would just let it ride. Go big or go home. You understand that statement? That's how I live my life. So early on in recovery, there was no recovery. There was no getting better. It was trying to white knuckle it, um, trying to overcome this without any help, trying to be my own treatment center. I dated the same girl for most part of high school. She broke up with me and later died in a car crash that destroyed me. People always say I was just a kid, but I know I lost a lot. Yeah. And, sometimes we know what we know, and our pain is our pain. And that's something as a therapist and as a recovering addict, I never try to diminish people's pain, no matter what it is. Their tragedy, their trauma is their trauma. Just because I would handle that situation different or I'd be able to go through that, there's some things that people would be able to say, well, that's nothing, 12. That's nothing. You drank over that, you used over that. Yeah, I did as well, Carl. I did as well. I'm glad you can identify with that because I did as well. I changed over time. I became the monster within that didn't want to feel a damn thing. But I wanted life to be going so fast. When I wanted to slow it down, that's when the alcohol came. But the alcohol came at a time when anger was the fiery inferno that was burning up everything in my life. And I didn't even realize that. I had no clue that was a part of who I was. And that is the investigative part of my whole channel is to investigate exactly what it is that causes different people to react to different life situations. Because trauma and grief are two of the biggest areas for addictive outcomes. Many people say stress, but I would say it'd be trauma. You know, I appreciate you being open with me right now. I went on to get married. It didn't last long. Unfortunately, I had to explain to her that I was really in love. I've heard of that. I've heard of that. And I can attest to that because, in my life, there's been certain females that crossed my path at my darkest times. But they love me in a way that I've never been loved since. So essentially, I was in love with the ghost. You know what I mean? And if you've ever heard the song "The Ghost of You," then you understand exactly what I'm talking about. And let me show you what song that is because that is exactly what I'm talking about. And music was a huge motivator for me to change who I was. I think it is um yeah. I don't think it's by My Chemical. It might be. I thought it was by Good Charlotte. Yeah, that's who it is. Good Charlotte. Yeah, this one right here. So if um if you want to hear what I'm talking about, this is the song right here. It's called "Ghost of You" by the Good Charlotte, and this album came out in 2004, and there was a good album, and then there was a bad album. So the Chronicles of Life and Death. If you've never heard of Good Charlotte or know who they are, you might take an interest. Could listen to a little bit of the words. I can't play a lot, and that's all I can play. But hopefully you go and you listen to that album, um, or you listen to that song at least, because you will understand that sometimes we live life chasing ghosts, and it's our ghost. You know what I mean? Like in your mind, you have this vision of what perfection means to you. And that's something a drug addict, alcoholic has as well, is that perfectionism. You think that you have control over everything in your life while your life is burning up around you. You know, I've shared this story multitudes of times that I've told people, look, it isn't when things were going bad that I destroyed my life. It's when things were going good and it was boring and it was slow and it was normal. That's when I'd take those grenades, throw them behind me, and watch the whole world burn. That's when it would happen. Not when things were going bad. You know what that's called, my friends? That is called self-sabotage. And if you've never done that to yourself, I wouldn't recommend it because it's not healthy. But many people do that. Whenever things are going good, that's when they blow up the world and watch it burn. You know what I mean? That's when they watch it burn. Right now, we are in a cycle of a full moon. On Sunday, supposedly it's a full moon. 3 days before and 3 days after are some of the most interesting parts of the full moon theory. 3 days before, the tide is going out. So if you have a chemical imbalance, think about yourself being 80% water. The tide is going out, so therefore, mostly the water, the whole chemical composition is going out. So you might feel a little off. You might feel unable to sleep. You might feel edgy or, just not yourself. The full moon happens and you start to feel a little normal. And then the 3 days after, the tide starts coming all the way in. So you might start to feel a little off, sleepy, all that. Um, so I hope that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because says I'd say it's by design. Girls are shown beauty as a Barbie doll. Meanwhile, guys are attracted to Barbie doll type. Yeah, I would agree with that. We're attracted to the Barbie doll type. I'm speaking for myself, but subconsciously, I'm attracted to the bad girl. I want the Barbie trophy, but she's still boring. She doesn't give me what the bad girl does. Now, if you can ever find that mixture in a person and that's what drives you in your attraction, hang on to it. See, I've had those people, and like I said, at the darkest periods of my life, I've had them. But since I was so dark, I was only attracted to the darkness. I didn't want the good person because I didn't know how to see myself ever being healthy enough to sustain it. And I used to tell one girl, you know what, it's like running a marathon when I've been walking or crawling most of my life. All of a sudden, you're way over there, you're healthier than me, and I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to pace with you, and it's not happening. Yeah. So think about that a minute. Think about that. Huh. Yeah, it all gets boring after 6 months. Yeah, because the representative has came and gone. You wake up one day and you're like, who the hell are you? Where was the other person that I am attracted to? Who is this? And it could be you that changes. It could be you that changes as well. So it works both ways. But think about that a little bit. It's like you wake up one day and you're like, who the All of a sudden they're needy, they're demanding, they're this, they're that. Where before they were self-sufficient, they were independent, they were all this. Yeah, the representative left the room and left you with the real person. And imagine if that was you waking up to a healthy recovery part of you. And when I'm saying recovery or addiction, I'm talking about the full spectrum. We're using drugs and alcohol as an example here, but it could go the full spectrum. There's a lot of people that are obese and killing themselves with food. And you can't tell them that their lifestyle is unhealthy. You can't. Just like we've talked about, you can't change anybody who doesn't want to change. We can't change somebody who doesn't understand that there is a problem. Are you living to eat? Or are you eating to live? You know, there's two different things. And if you have one variation of your life that is uncontrollable or lacks focus or lacks discipline, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but chances are there's other areas of your life that are beyond your level of powerlessness, you know? I'm glad you're here tonight, Carl, because I like the way you think, man. I've seen you in another chat and I've always respected you and your thought process. You said, I think my point is that we're programmed to be attracted to certain things. It's by design. Honestly, I would be happier being Amish, could shut off the outside world. You know, that's interesting you said that because I was watching a video the other day where this guy built a bunker in the middle of the forest in a tree stump. He built the bunker, he fortified it with trees and logs and all this. Then he like covered it with a tree stump. I was thinking to myself, you know what? At this point in my life, that would be heaven. But really, would it? For so long? I mean, can we actually go without our cell phone? How long can we actually go without electricity, running water, not having to hunt our food? But the fact that he did that and he was able to build a little part where he was able to cook into that bunker. There was wood and stuff burning. He was able to cook himself some food. There was a bed, there was a chair. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If you ever need that, that's a hell of a bunker. And it's not one that looks like, you're going to stumble across it. You'll be like, oh, there's a bunker in the middle of the forest. No, it's well hidden. You know what I mean? To be fair, how could I know what I'm actually attracted to? I only know what. I know what I'm attracted to is like what everybody else on the planet has this issue, I'm sure, at one point in their life. You always want what you can't have. If you can have it, you don't want it. If it's easy to maintain, if it's easy to get, a lot of people don't want it because there's no challenge. And for whatever reason, since we're talking about programming, whatever reason that has driven my life without a challenge, there is no existence of 12. That's healthy and unhealthy in two regards. Two regards. Because if you're never happy with what you have and you're always looking for better, are you ever going to find what that is that truly completes you? And since I was telling you earlier, I didn't do this on my own. I went to therapy for a year to overcome a lot of my vices. Okay, I couldn't do it by myself. And one of the things she told me My therapist told me the bond that you have with yourself will be the closest bond you'll ever have with anything on this planet, ever. So if you can never actualize and make yourself whole without anything exterior, you're going to be chasing your tail forever. And that's with jobs, that's with money, that's with relationships. I do as well. Pass the word. Pass the word. You know, if we're able to make that self-actualization and actually say, you know what, I'm all I need, without it being a selfish regard, and we were able to say, you know what, I'm okay with me. I'm okay with what I am, what I'm about, how much money I have, how much money, or where I live, what I wear, whatever. We're so fixated on, like you're saying, other people's perception of what success or valued relationships really are. And also, as you've said, many people have no clue what they're really, when you strip it all down, when you strip it down and when you say, who am I? And that's the question I used to ask most of my clients, if not all of them, at a particular point, because so many people can't answer that question. They can tell you what their financial status, they can tell you what they love to do for a living, they can tell you what they love to do as hobbies. But when it comes to answering that question, hopefully from the inside out, who am I? That is the self actualization question. Because when you strip it down, who you are is not what you are. And when you get to that capacity of understanding, then true healing and maintaining becomes hand in hand. Because when you understand who you are and you strip away what you are, then you're able to feed what you know about yourself. It's kind of like I use this example also because it's very true. Even though it's a movie, Julia Roberts played in a movie not long after Pretty Woman where she was a runaway bride. And she always fell in love with the wrong type of person. They'd hit it off really fast. The romance would be amazing, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, the person was asking her to get married. She would accept, of course. But just as she was walking down to the altar, something inside of her made her to turn or run, to fight or flight. She could not commit until she met one person that chased her almost to the end of the earth and finally got her to understand what she was doing. And at the end of the movie, he asked her a very funny question, but it's very ingenious. He asked her how she liked her eggs. Yes, exactly. PKC, exactly. Did you like that movie? It's an old 90s movie. It's one of those, I don't know. I think Hugh Grant was in that movie with her. I'm not sure. But he asked her, how do you like your eggs? Maybe that's a part in the movie. And she would say, well, how do you like yours? And they would say poached or whatever, however the person liked them. Well, anyways, she didn't like poached eggs. She liked hers scrambled or whatever. But since she didn't know who she went along with what they liked because she didn't want to have conflict. Because to her, that equaled connection, an easiness without the conflict, without the fighting, without the argument. Because the last thing you want to do is have to answer what makes you like scrambled eggs when I like poached. And people get into arguments like this all the time. They start as disagreements, but they go into arguments, you know? And I'm not trying to derail this. I know I'm all over the place, and I'm giving various examples, but I hope people are following along that without self-actualization, without that understanding of who you are, you're always going to be reaching for your likes, needs, and desires in the eyes of another. And there's still, it's a different generation these days. Most people are not getting married like they once did. Most people are not having children like they once did. Most individuals are vowing to stay single until they have an established life, which to some that is smart, to others that's just very controlled and very boring. However you look at that, that's however you look at that. I mean, I don't know what you agree with or what you don't. But I tried that once. I tried that during my addiction. Like I said, in my darkest times, I was hit with the best parts of life as I saw it. I would tell myself, okay, I'm gonna graduate college. I'm gonna I'm gonna be married by 30, have 2 kids, live in the burbs, blah blah blah. 30 came, still no college degree, struggling my ass off, struggling with my addiction, struggling with dead end jobs, all this, that, and the other. Okay, 35. I kept moving up the scale, right? Not realizing that 35, you're actually getting older in real life. And I said, oh, 38, 40. Nothing. So I said, you know what? Screw a relationship. I'm going to dive into my career. And that's what I did in 2004. At the age of 34, I dove into my career. Here we are, 20 years later. Went like that. 20 years. Wow. If you're a younger person and you're watching this, don't wait. Or wait, or do what you wish. But I would say be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. Find out exactly who you are. These vices that we pick up along the way, either they're our own, they're passed down from generation to generation, or dysfunctions in families, whatever they are, do not make this your focal point of self actualization because all it will do will prolong the happiness. And it'll make you deter from the happiness that you actually are having in life because you're so focused on what's wrong. You know, many people ask me, they say, well, 12, were you ever happy? Honestly, I can tell you no. Didn't really understand what happiness was. I knew happiness came on payday. I knew happiness came when I was at the strip club. I knew happiness came whenever I was infatuated with a new girl. I knew happiness came when I got a new car, new clothes, new shoes, whatever. But internally, it never lasted. It always was a fleeting thought. And today, with everything that I possess, everything that I do, happiness is never a long standing state of mind. We're not meant to be eternally happy. And I'm not talking biblical here, but we're not really, I don't believe we're mentally programmed to be happy all the time. You're right. You're right. Life has gotten a lot faster. But think about what I just said. If you kind of like that song, don't blink, because you blink, 20 years go by, and you ask yourself, where the hell did 20 years go? Where did those 20 years go? What have I done in these 20 years? Have I made my life actually better, or have I just been surviving? And that's part of what I have up there at the title that says we can go home. We can go home. We can finally get to a point where we make peace with the parents if they're still here. We make peace with brothers, cousins, uncles, whoever. Maybe your own children you don't have a good relationship with. You can go home. You can get back to that peace of mind that says, I'm okay, you're okay. Because multitudes of problems only add more problems. They're never solution based. That's what irritates me so much whenever in the true crime genre, people are seeking justice and truth, but they just keep asking more questions. They never get to a solution. So how can that ever be the outcome? But I'm not going to get on that. I'm talking about real life today. If all you do is question your life and never found any kind of solution that's going to last over time, then you're just building on quicksand. Just like, you know, would you build your house on sand without any solid foundation? Or do you make sure that you have the rebar and the concrete and all that stuff? Because you want, no matter what, your house burns down, hurricane, whatever, tornado, it's swept away. You want something solid to build back on. And that's uh that's hopefully something that we ultimately find at an important level of self-reflection, self-understanding. We can go home again. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation of 12 Gauge Investigative Channel discussing addiction and recovery and the parts of life that lead us to self-destruction at times. But try to remember, we can go home. We can get back to that peace of mind. And it starts with you and it ends with you. I guess my guest is not making it tonight, hopefully tomorrow or the next day. I do have a special guest on Monday appearing on a true crime channel podcast. So if you're in the area, be sure to hop in and check that out. I am doing a true crime tomorrow night about campus murders, and it has nothing to do with Idaho, but it's kind of like a reflection of different types of campus situations that have happened and caused tragedy in many people's lives. It's a transition from tonight. Tonight we're talking about recovering. Um, so hopefully you guys will be back and let the word be out there that this channel is not what people perceive it to be. I am not who people perceive me to be. I hope that, by me opening up, this gives you a different perspective of exactly who 12 Gauge is and who I've always been. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me, and thank you, Carl, for that compliment. I'm glad you really enjoyed this because there's more to come. And if you watch this on replay, thank you for showing up and watching and being a part of a positive community. Maestro, cue that music. Till next time, I hope you stay well.